rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's remain standing and join for a brief moment of silence, as today is, what, the 75th anniversary of the Normandy invasion, D-Day. Many Americans lost their lives at that battle. In their memory, let's bow our heads in silence, and of course we keep in our thoughts and prayers all those in uniform who each day defend our freedoms at home and around the world. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman.
Here.
Councilwoman Lofstad.
Here.
Councilwoman Scalera.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier. Here. Councilman Tebow.
Present.
All right, so we've got them all. All right, so we're going to start today with a water quality proposal to design and install a nitrogen removing biofilter for Westhampton Beach High School. Let me ask you a question. I'm not seeing Dr. Goldberg. Is he on the way?
He's right there.
He's like 10 seconds away.
Perfect.
Two.
Enter Dr. Goldberg. Stage left. I was going to stall and go on to a different topic until you got here. But okay, so Dr. Goldberg is here. We also are joined by Frank Russo, engineer, and with the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, and Janice Shearer, our Assistant Town Planning Director. So who wants to kick this off? And Lisa Combrake is here, okay, involved with this too. All right, Lisa, you want to introduce it?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. So as you know, we're in round 2 of the WQIP projects, and we heard a number of presentations with the Water Quality Advisory Board. And as you may recall, Janice Shearer recommended that we schedule work sessions on some of those projects prior to scheduling the public hearing. For today, we have the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology to present to you their proposal for this round of funding. You also have with you today a memo from Janice Shearer raising some questions regarding the proposal that we would also like addressed today.
Okay, who's next?
Can I just ask a question relative to the rounds? Because we just had a hearing at the last town board meeting for, I think, 3 projects or 4 maybe. So is this part of that round or is this part of the second?
This is part of our 2019 round.
So
what
we usually
did,
do 2.
The first round,
the first, well, it's the only round, honestly.
we could always add another round.
This is one of the 4
I thought we were trying
proposals
to do
that
2
were
rounds.
in the public hearing.
This is in
There-
addition to
In addition to that.
So, unfortunately, you weren't here that day of the work session. We had a spreadsheet of about 12 different proposals.
Right.
And the way I said, it's some of these are just bigger and take a little more thought and consideration than grouping them together. So we kind of are trying to batch them into groups.
Oh, it's for the hearing purposes.
For the hearing
Okay.
purposes, but some of them, for you to be more comfortable and understand, what's being proposed and the questions the committee has asked, and, just to have that benefit, we scheduled the
This
work
wasn't
session.
on that initial list.
It is, it was.
It was?
Oh, absolutely.
At the hearing that we held?
No,
Not
not
on
the
the
hearing.
hearing,
That was like our
batching
first
them.
batch of sort of like,
there's
That's what I
12
understood.
total, I think.
yeah, so some of them were batched, like, why hold those up while we're still sorting through the others?
Because you can move forward with those. And,
Yeah, those were
so
like,
this- more will
These all
come.
sort of came in at the same time.
everything came in at the
but
same
you're
time,
grouping
and
them
they're
different.
being looked at together, but at the same time, some were sort of, not no-brainer, but pretty simple, routine things that we can go forward with. Others take some more thought and consideration, which we'll schedule work sessions for.
Okay.
So that's just
Makes
how we're
sense.
approaching
What
it,
is
so it's just easier.
What's our funding allocation? So we would be based on, what, 2018's revenues or 2017's revenues?
18, right?
It was approximately 10 million. As you know, you reserve 4 million for East Quogue, water main extensions.
Right.
And then we have about 2 million in acquisitions that are pending and, working at.
And then we had
being
some
worked out.
for the sanitary rebates.
And then about 2 million for that. So there's about $2 million in potential award funding
For 2019,
for
based on
2019
2018.
for this round. that we're talking about. This proposal, which you'll hear about, is broken into 2 phases. One phase is a site characterization report, which is really the nuts and bolts of like what they're going to do, and Chris and Frank will go into that about the specifics. That site characterization report is always required before you could really get into an actual project. So that's really step 1, and that is what we are recommending you go forward with at this time. And then, but to see the full picture, you have to understand that the full proposal includes the second phase, which is in excess of $1 million. It's, I think, 1.2 or 1.5 million.
So then, but just so for our purposes, so we know what we're allocating and prioritizing, is everything that will be presented to us, whether it's in this batch or the next batch, all be within that allocated $10 million, so we're not going to be going over?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's actually within the 2 million.
That's what I meant, within the 2. Glad that's
And
over.
we're going to break all that down, but because it's just a lot of different proposals, we want to be able to give you the benefit of hearing all of them as you should, and then we'll get into, funding award allocations. But it is our just upfront recommendation that we at least go through with the site characterization component, but just so you know what the full breadth of this request is, I want you to be aware of the full extent. And we've asked them to give you a breakdown of what that, we've asked you to give them a breakdown of what that site characterization report will include, and they'll go through that.
Tom and John, I was just asking, like, what happens if we approve the first part of it and either don't have an allocation in the round 2 for the second part of it the following year, or we have to be mindful then if it's got a first phase and a second, when we're saying yes to this first, we're really also kind of committing to the second. We have to pull that out. We're starting with an allocation
Which
already
is
in the year
probably part of the
2020.
purpose of what you're doing here today, to give us the overall picture.
Well, the
of
committee, and we've debated this also at the committee.
And you've come to us
because
and
we're
asked
not
us
really
about it.
asking you to commit the full breadth of it in this round. You would have to consider, because the site characterization are really the details. So it comes down to whether you're willing to pay for that engineering detail up front, whether they do it next year or in 3 years, you're going to have that upfront information done.
And we can
So-
decide,
and you can decide
no,
that
but
if-
it's not that we've committed ourselves to a project. We've committed ourselves to finding out whether or not we want to commit ourselves to a project, which is
Exactly.
the first step to anything else.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's
Okay.
no
I just wanna be-
no glove fits all here. So it's important. Some of these projects are multi-year.
Right.
And so the funding won't be consistent over those 3 years. It may be more upfront or less upfront depending on how you get to that point. So when we commit to a particular project, we're committing to a phase 1. They will advise us that these are longer-term projects. In some cases, the decision that we make at the outset will either let that go forward or not. But, they're very diligent in presenting us what we're going to encumber over a period of time, so that we're not going to get to a point midway and then suddenly, run out of funds.
Well, if you do commit the money to the site characterization and the school district said, like, we don't want to do it, then you did pay for that site characterization report and you didn't get an outcome that, so in our report, we recommend that you do have some level of commitment that they're going to move forward and actually implement this plan, if that's what, but there is always this, the planning and design of something is always a phase 1 sort of thing that has to happen before you can commit the money in the second phase. So it's right that it's broken down like that, but it just comes down to, you need to know that even if you did go forward, what that full scope really is, like you're saying.
make sure we have the money to
make sure you
go
have
in
it, or in
second.
future rounds to keep it in mind, like they want to go forward with this, we've got this $1 million thing, or can they provide a match, or is there other funding they can go for this? So all those things have to get worked out. But right now, and we went back and forth in the committee about, and the consensus there is that if you don't start getting these site characterization reports done and know what you're facing, then you're not going to really get to that implementation phase. So it is worth assessing those things,
So it's
Janice,
sort of a
current-
feasibility study,
pretty much.
so we'll know if you can even cite one of these systems.
And that's
at
what
that
they'll go through
location.
today, which they're pretty confident you can, obviously, but there's
Right,
more
but
to
then there's
it.
always a cost, so we don't know this will help determine what the cost
Right.
will be of constructing
It
it.
gives us some
Right.
So it could be
visibility.
cost prohibitive.
Exactly,
but
and
now
we
this
have
includes-
asked for a more detailed cost-benefit analysis as part of this site, not just a scientific site or engineering site characterization, but a more robust cost-benefit analysis to
And there's
be
nothing in the
part of this.
CPF water quality authorization that prohibits funds being spent on this kind of feasibility study?
Not at all. It says for the planning, design, and, characters, it has specific language.
As a matter
but
of fact, just
Just
for
just
point of
making sure.
reference, in the development of the legislation, that was exactly one of the concerns about when we have infrastructure projects which are more complex. It's not that you're buying land, now you have a lot of engineering involved, that we're able to do it that way, and that was actually quite a long interaction in the development of the legislation.
Did you have a
All right.
question?
Currently, what's the role of the school district? Are they requesting this?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a letter from the superintendent as the applicant, and they would be going out to bid. They would be handling the project, and Chris can get into all of those considerations. But this
And
is a
does-
school district project that would be like managed by Center for Clean Water Technology, who would then outsource the engineering component as well. So that's a separate engineering firm that would be doing the site characterization work.
Right. School districts are not under local zoning law. They would have to get permitted from state ed, I believe.
I don't even think you need a permit for
For a septic
for
system,
what we're
it's just
talking
the
about
health
here,
department?
For NRB.
Well, this is a PRB type system.
You need a health department approval, of
Right.
course, but I would let them go.
This is a
into
PR.
That's one of the questions it asks.
Yeah.
Is it in the town?
It's one of the
Is it
questions.
in the village or
What
in the
happens if the
town?
Suffolk County Health Department denies or delays?
Right.
It's in here.
The school's within the village or the town? Probably village.
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 So it wouldn't go through our building department anyway.
No, it
But-
doesn't anyway. Only when it comes to sanitary systems in the IA world, we only get involved because there's an electrical component, electrical permit.
So, and I guess the idea, we'll get into this, but, focusing on schools where you have hundreds of students, hundreds of kids, you get a big bang for the buck because of all the sanitary effluent that is.
Right,
Come,
and this
so
has
it's all-
also been done, I believe, in Springs.
So rather than single-family homes, you get all the kids from the entire
Right,
region.
and that was, in the beginning of this program, we actually sent a letter to all the school districts because we looked at them as, this high flush, contributor. And so we sent a letter to every school district, when Mary was here, asking for, if you, in your facility planning, if you're looking to upgrade, please let us know and try to reach out. And so this is our first school district that's doing that. So with that, Chris Gopa.
All right,
We're ready.
we're ready for you now, Chris.
Okay, great. Good morning. I'd like to introduce you to Frank Russo. He's the Associate Director for the Center for Clean Water Technology. Frank came on board with us in 2018. He had a 40-year career with
Can I
H2M.
ask if he was still there?
He's now with us, actually, as Associate Director for Wastewater Initiatives. If you didn't know, he designed the tertiary treatment plants that are in Port Jefferson and in Patchogue. He also designed the New York State's first ever fertigation sewage treatment plant in Riverhead, and carried that through from being to being a tertiary plant and then eventually being used for fertigation. So we're very blessed to have Frank on our team. He's bringing great innovation to what we're doing and is a full-on partner. I'm giving this presentation, but I'm sure I'll get to the point where I'll be stumped and he'll have the right
no
answers.
offense, Chris, but,
Yeah.
Christine Fenton, our town engineer, visited your center after Frank been there for a little while. So we saw a high level of practicality being instituted there. So I appreciate it and what you're doing. I'm glad you're there, Frank. I've asked Christine Fenton to be
Oh, great.
come here because I think we're going to be talking about PRBs.
A little bit about NRBs, yeah, and wood chips,
I was
sure.
going to ask you,
Yeah,
what's the
wood
difference
chips, so-
between the PRB and an NRB?
Well,
Well, we're involved in giving some wood chips to another system, so just wanted you to have, thank you, Christine, for coming upstairs. I just wanted you to be available.
It's direction.
Yeah, maybe I'll go through and then I'll get to NRBs,
Okay.
and then if you remember, you can ask me about PRBs.
I won't forget.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a background for this project, and I have some slides, obviously. I introduced myself and Frank. I'm the director of the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, founded at the behest of the governor in 2015 at Stony Brook University. So this project is in Westhampton Beach High Schools, and so I'm going to focus first. This is CPF, and it's about water quality. So I just want to give some context here. These are groundwater nitrogen concentrations around Westhampton Beach Village and Westhampton in general, and you can see there are definitely hot spots in that region, in some cases over 20 milligrams per liter, which we know the EPA drinking water standard is 10. So, and that's just, that you can see anywhere that's in yellow or orange, that's all in the 10 range, and that's the danger zone really for groundwater.
So these are all contributory to the money bog?
Correct, exactly. That's exactly right. And so for the past 8 years, with support from or collaborating with News 12, we've been doing these water quality surveys of all of Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk County. Actually, last night sent Bill Corbell the first one of 2019. It may look silly with the traffic signs, but what it essentially is doing is using state and federal standards for water quality on different parameters, fecal coliform, water clarity, oxygen, and then giving a quantitative metric for all of those relative to state and federal standards, and then making it simple for public digest in order to just see whether good, fair, or poor relative to those things. Anyway, with a lot of data, we can focus on Moneybog Bay, for example, and this is, as I said, 5 years worth of data. Of all of the stations we look at, 30, Moneybog Bay comes up second worst when it comes to water clarity. And obviously, of the many sites we have in the town of Southampton, it is the worst. The worst one is the Forge River. So obviously water quality, these are algae levels, the total levels of chlorophyll. Water clarity, it actually, of the 24 sites where we could get a bottom reading, came up as the worst water clarity. There are brown tides in this region all the time. I'm sure that brown tides have contributed to the loss of shellfish and to eelgrass. And the brown tides are actually, this is like the epicenter for brown tide blooms. And this is no surprise, just as background context. Why is this? Well, intense nitrogen loading, and you couldn't be further from the two ocean inlets, right? Dead in the middle between Shinnecock Inlet and Moriches Inlet. And so that's the real danger zone. When you have poor flushing and high nitrogen loads, this is not a surprise. We know these sorts of things are going to happen. Also very low levels of oxygen. The DEC never wants to see below 3 milligrams per liter. We're seeing every summer levels well below that in this region. Just very briefly with regards to protection of marine habitats and salt marshes, of course they're very interesting marine ecosystems, but they're also very important for protecting communities. And so the Moneybog salt marsh is what's being pointed to right there, and you can see that's very large and there's a lot of homes behind that. What I'll point out also is the anticipated sea level rise just by the middle of this century. And essentially what you're seeing is if you look on the western bank of Moneybog Bay, you see homes that will be inundated due to flooding. And on the eastern bank, what you see is that this salt marsh is actually protecting the homes behind it against flooding. I could show you the 2100 map. It's even worse, of course. But Hurricane Sandy, a similar situation. The entire western bank was flooded during Hurricane Sandy, but on the eastern bank, many of those homes and roads were protected because that salt marsh was in place. About the same time Hurricane Sandy hit, a very important paper came out really solidifying the relationship between high levels of nitrogen load and the loss of salt marshes. In this slide, what you see on the top are obviously just photographs of a healthy marsh, one heavily loaded with nitrogen. But on the bottom, from that paper that I'm citing right there, is a CAT scan of the roots of the salt marsh. And so what you see on the right is what happens when a salt marsh is overloaded with nitrogen. Essentially, the roots get weaker. They don't need to work as hard to get that nitrogen out because there's so much nitrogen being provided to them. And therefore, the energy goes into making what's known as above ground biomass. Weaker below ground biomass leads to the collapse of the salt marsh. And so, while that was the flooding that was protection on the eastern bank during Hurricane Sandy in 2012, if we don't mitigate nitrogen load and we continue to lose that salt marsh that's left there, that creates a flooding hazard for this community as well. So before Frank joined us and when he was still with H2M, we worked together on a wastewater study for the village of Westhampton, where we looked at lots of different things. We delineated the entire watershed of Westhampton Beach Village. You can see that in the red is the full watershed of the village. The only water body that's fully in that watershed is Moneybog Bay. And so when we looked at the source of nitrogen to that system, you can see that it's 72% wastewater. As you can see, a fraction is from Main Street. That's being taken care of by the sewage treatment plant. But the very large majority still is from on-site systems, including the 2 schools being the largest source in this watershed. So again, this is what this drafts basically is what the plan that came out for this. And again, had multiple phases. Phase 1 was connecting the downtown region to the airport. You're well aware of that. You're supporting that effort. Phases 2 and 3 are expanding the sewer district slightly to a place that makes sense and is feasible and cost effective. But phase 4 came together when I was working with Mayor Moore, and I said, you know, there are always in these cases of wanting to put in sewer districts the idea that, oh, you just want to promote growth. And so I said, you know, and I know, and speaking with Mayor Moore, that she really wanted to address a very serious situation. If you've been to downtown Westhampton Beach and you go behind that Main Street, I mean, you know, the whole place is already underwater, and you know that the septic tanks are just sitting in there. So, you know, she knew that, and that's a real issue. But what I suggested to her is to have an additional phase, because it became very clear with regards to the sewage district that you wouldn't be able to sewer the entire village. It would just be cost prohibitive. But why not have the initiative to put everything else on innovative and alternative systems to reduce that total nitrogen load because of the sensitivity of the receiving water body, Moneybug Bay. And so what this shows is how the different phases address the total nitrogen load from the village to Moneybug Bay. And you can see each step is a significant knockdown of the total amount of nitrogen loading, but that the IA systems is really what's going to have the biggest impact. So now turning to what we're doing in the Center for Clean Water Technology, we have our goal. We say 10-10-30. That goal is to design systems that reduce nitrogen below 10 milligrams per liter. We'd like them individually to cost less than $10,000 per home, and we want them to last at least 30 years. I can tell you that we've already achieved 2 of our 3 goals. We have systems that continually deliver less than 10 milligrams per liter, and they're based on technologies that will last more than 30 years. We think 50 years or beyond that. The cost so far has been our biggest challenge, but we're working on that. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about our technologies and get right to the Westhampton Beach School situation. So we're all aware of how systems work now. They're designed specifically to hold on to the solids and release the liquid waste into groundwater. And as we now know, that liquid waste is where almost all the nitrogen is. And so these systems do remove very, very little nitrogen. It says 40 milligrams per liter, but that's way off, particularly for a school where there is no laundry being done, no shower, not as many showers being taken, so that wastewater is not being diluted. And you know, I'll just be blunt here. The biggest source of nitrogen is actually urine, and so that's why wastewater nitrogen in schools is very, very concentrated. We have developed these NRBs, nitrogen reducing biofilters. I just want to introduce those here. They're meant to be add-ons to any existing system, either residential or larger than that, like a school. How they operate, essentially, is using a technology that is common when there's not a sewage treatment hookup, and that is something known as a drain field. So the wastewater gets distributed through a drain field, and underneath that is very simply 2 different layers. A layer of sand, that's for homes at least, it's 18 inches, and the layer of sand mixed with wood chips. And so with that, just looking at how that looks, that sand layer performs something known as nitrification. It takes the ammonium that's in wastewater, converts it to nitrate, and then that lower layer performs denitrification, removes the nitrogen because it converts that nitrate into nitrogen gas. And you need both of these steps in order to get that nitrogen removal.
Those are both aerobic?
So the nitrification layer is aerobic. So if you look at the bar on the right, we have to have nitrification, you need the oxygen. But to get denitrification, you actually need no oxygen whatsoever. And as you can see, we actually, to facilitate that, in some systems, we actually have a liner along the bottom. And so that creates this anoxic zone, and that's what allows for denitrification.
It is attached to an existing system. It's like another step in the process.
Exactly, exactly.
And how does the gas escape?
It just percolates up and through. And in fact, in some cases, in experiments, when we do this experimentally in the lab, if you seal the chamber, you can see the bubbles and the gas build up in there.
It's a very, very good visual. to
Yeah.
show that.
Yeah.
The oxygen
We're breathing
doesn't go
80%
down
nitrogen
to
right
keep
now,
it-
so.
Say that once
And the
more.
oxygen doesn't go down to keep it anaerobic.
Well, the oxygen does go down. So in that lower layer, it stays down and stays anaerobic. So now, as I know you're aware, Article 19 passed in 2016, allowing the ability of Suffolk County to legally install these innovative alternative systems. There are multiple systems out there, at least 6 that have been approved by the county, provisionally approved to be installed. I just put forth this figure here to show all of the systems that they're testing, including the provisionally installed ones. The text might be too small, but what it's showing is that the systems we've put in the ground in Suffolk County are outperforming all the other ones that are currently in the ground. There are some that are doing quite well, for example, the Fuji Clean system, but the data provided by Suffolk County shows that ours are actually doing better than those.
In terms of nitrogen reduction.
In terms of nitrogen reduction. But I'll also point out, you queued up my next slide.
Can you go back one second?
Yeah,
We're
sure.
trying to read it. So yours is the first and the second one, yeah.
Exactly. So those are our lined and unlined systems that we've installed. And so all the other ones are just different companies that have...
The line is doing the best.
Correct. And the line gives the assurance that the system will stay with low oxygen, but it costs a little bit more. So the unlined system is simpler to install and also performs pretty well. And so you can see there's several companies that have tried and are just not going to make it clearly in Suffolk County, and some were very surprised in Suffolk County, but there's others that are doing quite well and have already been approved. And some companies have done poorly and have come in and tried to address their systems, and other companies have sort of folded up their tents and gone home, so to speak. But beyond nitrogen, I just also want to emphasize that these systems are doing an amazing job of removing drugs and pharmaceuticals from wastewater as well. And so what this shows is a list of, I think, about a dozen compounds that include antibiotics, drugs, different pharmaceuticals. There's also, I think, in those, caffeine, DEET, and things like that. And then on the right, you see the percent of the influent that gets removed. And in many cases, it's 99%, or it's obviously almost all 90% and above. And this is significantly better than sewage treatment plants do. In fact, we just had a meeting about this on Monday as a center and trying to get a handle on exactly the mechanism. And it looks like the nitrifying bacteria, the ones in that top layer, seem to what is known as co-metabolize and break down these compounds. So beyond just nitrogen, these are doing a good job of cleaning up our groundwater. And of course, we all know, whatever doesn't discharge into surface waters, which I emphasize, we use to drink. And obviously there's compounds we don't want in our drinking water.
How about phosphorus?
So phosphorus is, again, more than 90% removed by these systems, but actually by any system, because the phosphorus is, once the groundwater becomes oxygenated, binds with iron within the aquifer. So as long as there's oxygen present, you get really good removal of phosphorus.
Chris,
Yeah.
trying to understand how the processes would possibly remove, these chemical constituents. Are they just getting bound up, or are they getting broken down?
No, it looks like firstly, I'll be perfectly honest, we don't know right now, but we have experiments. Frank has established at the university the first ever we call it our wastewater research and innovation facility. It's literally a trailer that's now plumbed with wastewater from a pumping station, where we can now pump in real wastewater and perform experiments to answer that exact kind of question. As you can imagine, wastewater, municipal wastewater, is a interesting cocktail that's very hard to replicate in a laboratory. But the research that's available to date demonstrates that there's this process, again, it's called co-metabolism, and the bacteria in that upper layer, that sand layer, the nitrifying bacteria, seem to co-metabolize and microbially break down these compounds.
That's amazing.
And I will also say that because we have an 18-inch layer in the way we design them, the water takes almost a day to pass through that layer, so it gives an enhanced time. So there's a lot of bacterial activity going on in there anyway, And so they've got time to react and act
The
upon these
bacteria is
compounds.
taking in the caffeine and the Tylenol.
They're not taking it in, they're just breaking it
I was
down.
going to say, they're pretty happy at that point. They're energetic,
Pain-free and lots of energy.
no headaches.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah. It's all extracellular bacteria. Yeah,
And I believe that those wood chips came from one of our facilities.
absolutely, yes, yeah.
Is that what you were
And
gonna say?
We're very grateful for that. That's been a great partnership, and John, you did come visit us and help facilitate it as well, so I think.
We provided the wood chips from,
Yep.
Yes,
And we're providing wood chips to,
Well, that's going to be on for discussion for the Springs school system.
Yep.
That H2M is working.
which I'm going to talk about.
yeah.
Uh,
So that's why, I didn't mean to bring you from your work, but I just wanted to be sure that we were in that loop, and if we can help provide for these projects, should the board decide to go forward with it. I don't know what the total amount is.
This is a wonderful opportunity for the town as well, to utilize some of
Yeah,
our.
you gotta come up, Christina, I'm sorry. No one can hear you.
Okay.
Dr. Gobler?
Yes.
Before you go on, this system works off of a standard septic tank, right?
Exactly. It has
Septic tank
our
versus
NRBs
solid
have
and-
one. They hook up to existing systems, and they have one dosing pump. So the only moving part is a single dosing pump that takes the wastewater from the tank to the system on a regular basis, which prevents the system from being at the volumetric whim of the home or facility. That is, if you had a lot of showers or laundry being done, the system's not flooded, but rather it gets a steady dose, which research has shown allows the bacteria to do their thing and essentially perform better than if they're just flooded all at once and then go dry and then flooded again, so to speak. So to getting on to the system we're looking at, so we're looking at here Westhampton Beach Middle School and High School. This is the best rendering we have of their wastewater systems right now. A series of pools and rings that were installed. I believe one system was installed recently. There was the gentleman who was out on the CPF who helped us decode it all the last time. He's not here. But one set was built, I think, in the 90s, and another set well before that. So the idea would be to reroute the wastewater from these to an IA system, and then probably back into these. But just highlighting some of the points, Janice mentioned that we're looking at a two-stage approach to doing this. So I just want to introduce what we're thinking about for this and how it breaks down in those two phases. So the first phase would be CCWT partnering with the town. You would be supporting it in part, and obviously with the school district, and then bring on an engineering firm to work with them to come up with design. So firstly, we need to characterize the wastewater that's there. We need to know exactly what's in the wastewater, what the exact flows are, because you can't, to properly design the system, you have to know that. So we're proposing a 5-day intensive study during the school year to know the exact characterization of what's in the wastewater, but also the exact flows, because right now it's estimated on the number of people there. We then would have, again, partnering with the engineering firm, have a design report, as well as the preparation of construction plans and specifications. So for this first phase, we're requesting $195,000 of CPF funds. We're donating $48,000 worth of our time and services. Our laboratories are what is known as ELAB certified, Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, run by the New York State Department of Health. So that is our analyses are certifiable at the state and county level for nitrogen, for pathogens, from other compounds as well. And so I'll just emphasize this whole thing. We will, for this whole project, the center is not getting any money. We're giving money because we think this is a really good project. And so we're donating our time. Frank will be involved. I'll be involved. Our laboratories will be involved. And it's through this phase, I just want to say also, so I've emphasized the NRB, but following our first meeting, and I'm going to emphasize further here, I'm not committing to installing an NRB at this location. What I'm committing to is installing an IA low nitrogen system that is going to be the most cost effective for town dollars and do the best job of removing nitrogen. That may end up being that we simply install our NRB. It may be instead that we end up installing what we're doing similar to the spring school, which we weren't involved in the design part. But in the spring school, they put in a commercial IA system, and they're using our technology as what's known as a polishing step. So we've designed an additional type of NRB we have, takes those wood chips and actually puts them in a box, and actually is even more effective than that line system. And that's what we're doing at the spring school. So I'm like 2 slides ahead because I was going to talk about this.
But how does that work? Like, for people that don't, like as a layperson, you're saying putting it in a box, a different
So-
line system. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the NRB, you saw what the NRB looked like before with the 2 different layers. So I guess I'll just go back to show.
Which was fed by the original system.
Yep, sorry about this, but it's yeah. So the box system works just like this system, except that lower layer is not there. And the sand layer feeds into a box that's filled with wood chips. And the nitrified wastewater flows through there, and it actually works even better with regards to reducing nitrogen.
Why?
Was that why you said?
Yeah.
We think it's because it's all wood chips. And so the sand's not in there, and the residence time's a little bit longer. And so, I mean, it's not, I will just say it's marginally better. So it's like 4 milligrams per liter versus like 6. And the other benefit of having it in a box that's separate is that if you ever wanted to replace the wood chips, you could just open the container and swap them.
That's sort of how the nitric system works.
It's similar, very similar. Yep.
Is there a leaching field off of the box with the wood chips?
So after the box, it has to go to some final deposition. And so I think I have I'm getting way out of order at my slides, but I think I have it somewhere in there. Maybe I'll just continue to go through this, and then so phase 2 would actually be the construction costs of the construction of the system, and then the evaluation of the system. So the construction would be done obviously by a construction firm. The evaluation would be done by the center, and we'd be evaluating its performance. And again,
ELAP is...
that's again the ELAB certification, Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program that the state runs.
Okay.
And so for this whole project, then we'll be contributing and donating tens of thousands of state dollars that the state we get in support from the state. And Suffolk County, for what it's worth, has pledged also for this project to put forth $10,000. They're very excited. We work very closely, of course, with the Department of Health. All of our systems are being tested through Department of Health Services. And so they believe that this is a great thing. They're aware of the spring school, and this would be the first, obviously, first installing a low nitrogen system in the town of Southampton.
How long has the system been in the spring school?
It isn't even in yet, actually. So in fact,
And-
yeah.
Will they be, are the spring school and this one considered pilot programs or actual installations that
So
the county has said they're okay and that's what?
Well, the county knows about this, and
Right.
they are fully in favor of us doing this. Currently, our NRB systems are in the experimental phase within the county, but our data shows that our systems could probably collapse now, and we'd still make it to what's known as the next phase, the piloting phase, and then a year of data brings that to the provisional phase. But within this, we're allowed to put in 10 systems of each of the different types, and we've only have a handful of each. So.
Can I ask Chris?
Yeah.
In an application like this with a school, if you're going to go the NRB, if I'm saying that right, can kids play, like, can there be a lawn on top of it that's
Correct.
actually usable?
Yep.
And that's okay for kids to play on top of it? Yeah.
Yes, because remember, the wastewater is being distributed several feet down. So.
And I think this is one of the reasons why schools and facilities make sense for your technology, because you need the broader
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
And some of the issues, obviously, that we've had is trying to shoehorn some of this into these little tighter spaces. So the box idea is kind of interesting in that respect, too. So, it makes perfect sense what you're
So
suggesting to me.
it potentially could cut down on fertilization, cut down on irrigation?
But it depends on the final deposition. If we what we think is going to be the most cost-effective is actually to run the wastewater back to the existing leaching pools, in which case there wouldn't be any irrigation benefit per se. We are working with the county, however, on some technologies that would involve some irrigation or fertigation, sort of,
You get, maybe you don't have enough data or time in the field with these systems, but, our experience with the PRBs, maybe, are we seeing, do they settle, the wood chips, as they, biodegrade? Do you see the earth starting to drop down?
We compact them as they're installed, so there shouldn't be a lot of compaction because of that. And also, when we do that as a singular layer, we are mixing it with sand also. So they're being mixed, and so it's not all wood chips, that layer. It's sand. It's usually a 50-50 mix, and there's compaction as it goes along. Yeah.
Okay. But you can watch that if you start to see the ground sinking a little bit, you can add more topsoil, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't seen that thus far. So a lot of words here. Hope I can even read through them all. But so I'm saying that we're not going to choose the exact system because I think we'd love to see our NRB system go in there, but it may not make sense logistically, cost-wise. We do think, no matter what, that our polishing units are what's going to give the lowest effluent. And so I think we'll be driven by cost and also feasibility and also what gets us the lowest nitrogen. If we did do a lined NRB, Frank has estimated we need about a quarter acre of the field that would be adjacent to the high school, and as you pointed out, John, that is available. But again, we may consider a commercial system, and either way, we want to reuse the existing infrastructure because typically that results in a cost savings. But
is that polishing unit, is that above ground or is that in ground?
That's in ground. Yeah.
In ground?
Yep. And again, we anticipate that we'll get the concentration of nitrogen below 5 milligrams per liter with that polishing unit. So just considering the existing use of school, these are estimates. Obviously, we'll get a finer sense of this once we do our wastewater study. But we estimate there's probably about 1,800 pounds of nitrogen being produced per year from this school. And we think we can be cutting that down by 95%. With the systems, and therefore removing 1,700 pounds of nitrogen per year from this watershed. And as I've emphasized in my introduction, and maybe I didn't say this, but I'll just say this now, I can't think of another location in the town of Southampton that needs nitrogen mitigation more than this location. Again, considering just the surface waters, but also protecting the community and that salt marsh that's there.
Well, the Moneybog is the second most prepared water body we have, correct?
Well,
Or actually, we could say
second or first.
First.
Yeah, I mean, it would depend how you divide it up and how much ownership you would take of the Peconic River.
Right.
But as far as a full marine water body is fully in town of Southampton waters, yeah, between Moneybog and Quantuck, that's yeah. I mentioned the spring school already, so we already don't really need this. But again, there's going to be a ribbon cutting for the installation of the system that's going to go on at the end of the month, I believe, and then we're expecting this summer for the install to happen. So it's a great, it's a great project because it's right on.
So for extrapolation on we're looking at 240 1,000 cubic yards, is that correct? Or 240,
That's for I think 240 yards for the.
is it 240 yards, right?
The contractor had asked for.
Okay, so is that a comparable number that we would be looking at in Westhampton? Springs is a smaller school, no, so it'd be about double that?
It depends on the alternative.
Yeah.
It depends on which system we go with.
Because I'm trying to link this, Councilman Lofstad had a great idea many years ago about, taking our southern pine beetle, pine trees that have been destroyed by the southern pine beetle as a source as well. And we produce a lot of
Yeah.
already. So.
And I'll mention in our research trailer that we're actually doing experiments with oak and that exact pine just to affirm that they're both performing equally well. We think that they will. Yeah.
Are you concerned at all? Because we've had so many issues with compost facilities and manganese, radionuclides and other things that, that basically using all these, this wood chip material might be introducing toxins, or is it all checked out before it's used?
We've done those experiments, and so what's very clear is, yes, when you create an anoxic environment and you've got organic material that's in sand, you're going to leach out metals. But what's also clear is that 99.99999% of our groundwater is oxygenated. And so we've done the experiments of what happens when that anoxic groundwater becomes reoxygenated. And the bottom line is all the metals that went into solution and are suddenly at high levels precipitate back out. And so for example, we've done the experiment where we take the anoxic groundwater that comes out of an NRB and then run it through 18 inches of sand. And it's actually just in the very top layer, everything goes back to normal. And so by the time you only get a few inches down, the groundwater looks like exactly as it did coming in. So these are just what are known as redox reactions, right? So you're creating an anoxic zone. Some metals become more soluble, like manganese, like iron, and then some become less soluble, like copper, for example, and then it goes back. So the only time that I'd be concerned would be if you had that anoxic water that was going towards a well. And that, hopefully would never be the case, because when they design homes, they always make sure that the well is not downstream of the wastewater.
Where is the Suffolk County, the wells for supplying local drinking water? I think they're above that watershed.
Yeah, they're up north of Grebretsky Airport, like right in the Pine Barrens. Yeah. So just a couple of things about cost-benefit analysis. We were asked that by the CPF committee, and so this project, Frank has estimated, would be the equivalent of sewering about 60 homes, and the cost would be actually more for the installation compared to what this would be. And then, again, Frank prepared this. He rightly points out we expect this to be done in 2 years, and you're not going to get 60 homes. You're not going to find 60 people and tell them within 2 years, upgrade. So we think this is a good alternative. And again, this will be the first public school in the town of Southampton to get CPF funds to address wastewater, so it could be a good blueprint for future efforts.
You're saying it's basically, the estimate is 25,000, and it would do as much nitrogen removal as 1.5 million, and if those were individual systems for homes.
Correct.
And that is a much better bang for the buck.
Yeah. And then, I spoke with Superintendent Mike Rade of the Westhampton Beach School District, and also as many of the teachers there. And I'm sure we all can estimate this is a great educational opportunity for students, to essentially understand wastewater systems, understand the chemistry. We're going to be doing an analysis of the wastewater. So we already have ties with the school district, but certainly it's a great opportunity for them to learn more, and even maybe be involved in the design of things and talk, show them what the alternatives are and have them consider the optimal design.
It's interesting, when I was a science fair judge at the elementary school in Remsenburg, and a large percentage of those science experiments by the elementary school students were dealing with issues like this.
Yeah.
So that's very promising.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Great thing.
This is probably too small to see in text. Maybe it's not for you, but this just breaks down the costs of what we're estimating for the whole thing. But the bottom line, again, is that the first half of the request is $195,000 to do the design and construction design and feasibility aspect of it. And then the rest is just an estimate of what it would cost, because we won't know until we know what we're choosing.
Will you provide this PowerPoint to us?
Sure, absolutely. This is just it's slight modification of what I sent
I'm a little confused. So Chris, the total cost is what,
1.5 million
For both phases, we're not approving.
for both phases.
what was that number you just showed me on the last slide?
1.5 million.
No, but the system would
195.
cost $25,000 to,
Individual systems. But that's. I will also say though that's the site specific. So I think you get it $25,000 for individual system if you have a simple install.
so you were doing,
You're basing that on our.
this was
our
1.5, the other
realizable
one was 25,000 for 60 homes. So
Correct.
So what is that 25?
per home.
Per home.
25,000,
Per
right,
home.
per
An
home,
IA system
times
per home,
60 is
times-
how much?
into the rebate system.
Right.
That's
Like if everyone, 60 homes were to do it.
At 25,000, 1.5 million, I did it.
It's 1.5 million, and this is also 1.5 million?
Correct.
So
Although
how-
it's,
Then how, then it's not a better bang for the buck, it's about the equivalent bang.
They're
for the
saying
buck.
it was
Well,
very
that-
low that they would even do it.
It's equivalent. So
Equivalent.
60
In-
homes is
But you're.
Mitigating
it's
more
not
nitrogen.
really equivalent because you're hopefully reducing a lot more nitrogen than our current systems do.
And a
That's true.
faster way as well.
correct.
Yeah,
And the cost
Right,
yeah.
and assuming the school too has a higher nitrogen concentration.
I think we're,
Yeah, it certainly
that's
will.
pretty well, that's been pretty well studied.
Yeah.
My question about that, though, is the effectiveness of the system. You get this big drop-off, obviously, in use in September, at the end of the school year, for those few months, period. How does that affect the system, is, I guess, a question.
That's an excellent question.
Or
You have
sit
to
at the
speak in the
table.
mic.
Yes, so, I mean, with sewage treatment in general, the bugs like to see a constant food supply. So here we're cutting it off for periods in time. So we have to design around that. We do that by putting in equalization tanks that hold it during the period that they're not there. So that increases the overall cost. So, and we do that, well, when I was with H2M, that's what we did. We always put in a big tank, equalization tank, to buffer the flow.
And does it do it automatically, or is it manual?
Yeah,
that
everything's auto.
And many schools have activities over the summer. They have summer
They
school.
do.
They have
They do.
staff that work. They also have
Right.
camps,
So-
training camps, sports
So
camps.
what we'll
But
do-
would that be enough to keep the system going?
No. So it's based on pounds of loading.
Right.
So what we do is we build it in segments. So we'll have a left half and a right half. Or we might do in quarters. So the system just gets valved off, and we'll continue to recirculate that. The system comes back very quickly. As soon as you start supplying the wastewater, it'll come back very quickly. But that's some of the research that we need to do, and right now we haven't been able to do it because we don't have a full-scale installation to deal with.
So those equalization tanks, are they barometrically run, or?
They're off floats.
Okay.
It's just a function of
the topography of the
the
area?
volume of the tank.
So you don't have to manually open and close the
No,
valves?
no,
They're all
nothing's
automated.
manual these days.
All right.
No.
Thanks, Frank.
And I think I don't have any more, yeah, so.
All right, any other questions? Christine?
I thank you for asking me to come up, because this is a wonderful presentation, and I think it's also a wonderful opportunity for the town to reuse the wood chips that we're making as a recycled product. We've been getting inundated with the material coming into the vegetative waste sites. So if this program it catches on and we can do it at other facilities, it'll be beneficial for us as well. In addition to being such a water quality benefit. So,
Thanks, Christine.
Is there, Christine, I mean, for the chips to be usable, is there a condition they need to be kept in? In other words, if they sit in their compost for too long, are they still usable?
well, you bring up very, very good points, because generally when our wood comes in, it's mixed loads of different species. It's got tree limbs with leaves on it. They really like the wood chips, and we've been focusing on the pine right now. But as Frank mentioned, they've been working with oak, which is also beneficial, because in addition to the pine beetle issue that we've been having, there's oak wilt, which is another devastating disease of trees. But we keep that wood logged until a certain time period before they need it, so that it doesn't get, when you chip woods and you don't mix it, it tends to gain a lot of heat and has the potential to catch fire. So we like to, bank our pine trees in a pile and chip it special for them, and I believe it has to be 2-inch chips, so we have to double grind it, change out the grates in our mow bark. So it's a process.
Yeah, so you really can't use like a composted material. You have to use
I would
fresh
love
wood
it
chips.
if we
If we could, that
could
would
do
be good.
that, but
It's a problem.
that would be wonderful.
All right, so it's
That's what you guys
basically,
need to study.
it's basically so fresh.
We actually are doing that experiment.
Great.
At the trailer. So we're
Are
looking
you?
at
With-
the third type of wood. So we're looking at oak, pine, and then like the mix of, whatever's available and see if that does the same job. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I have a
We
question
have a lot
about
of
the
compost.
funding
Yes.
and the Center for Clean Water Technology. I know in Sag Harbor, in the village, that the town gave some money to have the village, the waters in the harbor tested, and there was an issue between municipalities getting money over to the Center for Clean Water Technology.
Actually, that was not done by the Center for Clean Water Technology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that was done by my research lab, which is actually a different entity.
Different
Yeah.
entity.
Yeah.
Thank you for making
You're
that
welcome.
distinction.
Sure.
All right, any other questions for Chris? Bays are good,
So far, no brown ties. That's a
no
good
brown
sign.
ties?
Yeah.
Good. That's a good thing. Anywhere or just the Shinnecock Bay?
Anywhere so far. So far. So
Okay, anything else we need to be aware of?
The governor. I'm meeting with the governor in 2 hours. He's coming to plant clams in Belport Bay.
Are we getting the clams for Shinnecock?
I hope so. I know that the town lawyers are working on it. So
Okay,
I think there's small progress. I think, but
okay.
I'll certainly be asking the DEC about that today.
All right, good luck with that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Just so to wrap up, if the board is comfortable, then I would like to put this on for a public hearing in our next batch. I just wanted to make sure that everyone
Let me,
felt good.
everybody
Okay,
good?
Yes.
cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Janice.
Janice.
Absolutely. Good project. Lisa, can I ask you a quick question while you're here about buildings? There's a number of properties that we've acquired or in the process of acquiring that have buildings. Can you put together a list of sort of the status of CPF-owned properties with buildings and how they're being used? Which ones are scheduled for demolition? Which ones are just empty? There's a number of buildings. And what are allowable uses for buildings?
Yes, actually, this week, earlier, I had a meeting with John Irwin and Kristen Doulis on this subject, because I understand we do have complaints occasionally on the condition of buildings on CPF properties, and so between our two departments, we're making a master list of all the CPF properties that have buildings, who's responsible for maintaining them, whether they're scheduled to be demolished, if there's a stewardship agreement, and who that steward is.
Right, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Right, and we have
People are
some.
asking if we have any buildings that not-for-profits can use, and I'm not even sure what CPF allows.
Right, we have, between the two departments, we have different lists, so we're going to combine them and then review them together, make sure we're in agreement on what's what, and then make a separate list for vacant properties where maintenance may still be required, either because of grass cutting or wetlands restoration plan or other plans to keep the property in good condition, or fences that have been installed. So it'll probably take another week to 10 days to put all that together, and then we can bring that forward.
You might, I asked Ross to put together a CPF map based on use, so, parks or however,
okay.
over the years, we've adopted these properties for what they've been used for. And he has that map, set up already against the CPF categories.
Oh, good,
That's
okay.
useful to use.
That would be great, thank you. And then we'll also include with that information a schedule of allowable uses to the extent that I can determine that from the rules and regulations and the state law that we have.
Great.
Unfortunately, it's not always 100% clear, but the rules and regulations
That's what
are helpful. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, should we go to reviewing the draft agenda? So you should all have copies of it. This is for the June 11th meeting. That's next Tuesday, 1 o'clock. It's an afternoon meeting here at Town Hall. And we have a number of public hearings, 7 in total. First one is for a CPF acquisition, Henry Hildreth Partnership, Randall Road LLC in North Sea. Second one is establishing a seasonal parking permit only on a portion of Long Neck Boulevard in Flanders. The third extends a 3-hour parking area on School Street in Bridgehampton. The fourth one enacts Town Code Chapter 160, mining reclamation requiring groundwater monitoring for mining activities. The fifth is a public hearing to add Chapter 107, balloons to Town Code. This is the intentional release of balloons, helium balloons. Number 6, public hearing to consider amending Town Code 330-79.1, temporary permit for accessory farm stands to permit vending vehicles as accessory to pre-existing farm stands. Number 7, combined public hearing for SDGEIS amendment to Chapter 330 to add Article 32, Section 330-421 through 330-439 as the form-based zoning overlay district entitled Hampton Bays Downtown Overlay District. And that's it for public hearings. Then we go to resolutions. The first one, 31975, authorizes an agreement with Applied Energy Group in order to participate in the South Fork Peak Savers Program, which will supply free LED lighting fixtures to the Town Hall renovation project.
32008 as an authorization for the Long Island Head Start to sublease part of the premises located at 271 Flanders Road, Riverhead, to the Children's Museum of the East End.
ID 31962, authorize the donation of a surplus boat to the Sag Harbor Volunteer Fire Department for fire patrol and rescue in the water boundaries of the town of Southampton.
32005 is an authorization for the supervisor to execute a 2019 stewardship agreement with Maureen Stafford for services at Good Ground Park in Hampton Bays, and I have an amendment on the second whereas. Instead of saying December 1st through January 31st, it should say through December 31st.
Town Board Resolution ID 3.
Do we just, we,
Just cross it out and put,
so
I'll give
we'll,
it to
we
someone.
don't need to, yeah.
Yeah, she has
You got
it.
it?
Yeah.
So
That's
we'll
just
have
a
the
draft
typo.
review.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. All right, go ahead, Tom John.
Town Board Resolution 31998, to authorize the supervisor to execute a contract extension with Contemporary Computer Services Incorporated, CCSI, for management network services. Town Board Resolution 32010, authorize the supervisor to execute a contract with Contemporary Computer Services Incorporated for Jackson Avenue fiber backbone.
31988, authorize the supervisor to sign contract with Rogers and Taylor's Appraisal, Inc. for appraisal at 493 Rose Hill Road in Watermill. 31991, awards and authorize supervisor to sign contract with J&V Auto Salvage, Inc. for removal of abandoned junk and decommissioned vehicles.
31993 is a 2019 request for proposals for Shinnecock Commercial Dock Capital Project Design.
31994, 2019 request for proposals for sale of development rights within the Southampton School District. 31961 amends the 19 to 23 capital budget for town hall improvements. 31959 authorizes closure of capital projects. 32006 authorizes the highway fund pay-as-you-go for various equipment repairs.
32011 authorizes the Parks Department change order for Construction Consultants, Inc. for the Ponquag Beach redevelopment of the beach pavilion.
31990, replace member of the Bridgehampton Beach Erosion Control District Advisory Committee. 31974, authorize additional funds for Margolin Basunder, LLP, to represent and defend the town with regard to the matter of Group for the East End, Inc. et al. versus Town Westhampton, ZBA, and DLV Quad LLC et al. 31941 authorizes Community Preservation Fund tax refund pursuant to the first-time home buyer's exemption for Maximo Vermondo Penefiel and Carmen Haraz. John?
Town Board Resolution ID 31953 to authorize facility use fee waiver for the Truth Community Church as it relates to the David W. Crowham Community Center.
31983, Home Rule Request Resolution in support of Assembly Bill 7996 and Senate Bill 6206 as it relates to the alienation of parkland.
I have a question on that one.
Sure.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth whereas, I'm not understanding.
Which one is that?
It says, if it's determined that the fair market value of the Sabonic Road property is not equal to or greater than the fair market value of the McGee Street property, the town shall dedicate the difference of the fair market value of the lands to be alienated and the lands to be dedicated for the acquisition of additional parklands and/or capital improvements to existing park and recreation facilities. I don't know what we're dedicating and where it's going. I don't understand that
Right,
sentence.
so this would be basically, we're swapping the IGHL piece for the Tuckahoe Woods piece.
Right, no, I know what it says. I just don't
One's
understand.
bigger than the other,
Right.
and one may be worth more. We're picking up,
Well, the Sabonic
get-
Road is actually bigger substantially than the other, but I don't, but
Right.
what are we, it doesn't say what
so
we're,
if,
what
I
we're
guess if
doing.
the value of the McGee Street parcel is more than the Sabonic,
Right.
then we will spend that much more on open space preservation to make it equal. I don't think that's the case. I think
You're gonna
that-
use CPF to do that,
I
or
think-
what are you saying? Like, where's that money coming
let
from?
me
Where's it
just see.
going? It doesn't, it's, we need to figure that out.
Is not equal or greater.
The way the sentence, it's just not a structured paragraph.
The town shall dedicate the difference of the fair market value of the lands to be alienated to the lands to be dedicated to acquisition of additional parkland. I guess, yeah, I guess CPF would.
No,
No,
it
it wouldn't
doesn't
be
say CBF.
It'll be the other way around.
Right.
We would have to spend, I guess, that much money. I don't think that's
Can they
gonna be
work
the
on
case.
this and
though.
then explain it?
Yeah,
Because whether I agree with it or not, it just doesn't make sense the way
Yeah.
it's written, or it's certainly
I
open
think
for
I
interpretation.
think the piece that's becoming parkland is probably more valuable.
It doesn't, you
And
would
we would
think
have
so,
to
because
dedicate
it's a
funds
lot
to a
bigger.
recreational facility, perhaps, or open space.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right,
Whatever
and we
they
don't
meant.
have
Capital
Right.
improvements to existing park and recreational
All
facilities.
right, so we can try to
We
get
have
those
many.
answers.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just clear up the language either way.
But so the board's aware, so the one piece, I guess it's Sabonic and McGee is, it was acquired for affordable housing through condemnation many years ago. I think it's 14 acres. A lot of, through the years, people thought it was a nature preserve. And we've been trying to reconcile the fact that we took it to create affordable housing. An idea emerged with the IGHL piece, which is next to the, what's the name of that?
Tuckahoe Woods.
Well, it's next to the
Press.
Press.
Thank you, the
Press
press property, that could actually be perfect, that we could combine the two and do some affordable housing there. So to swap the parcels, so I think it's a good idea, it's just the mechanics of it.
I don't know how I feel about it as an idea, but just the mechanics of it need to be vetted and
Right,
understood.
okay. 31960 recalls and amends Resolution 2019650 for the North Phillips Streetscape and Pedestrian Enhancement Project proposed by the Spion-Cranstonburg Civic Association.
31963 accepts maintenance bond in connection with the site plan application of Hampton Bays Business District at Gabreski Airport PDD, Phase 11, or is that
Two.
2?
2A.
All right, 2A, 215 Rogers Way in Westhampton.
31972 appoints Michael Chi to Ordinance Enforcement Officer position.
31884 is a notice of public hearing to accept a deed of residential fee to be maintained as open space from Blair K. Gaza for for properties located at Northampton and North Sea pursuant to Southampton Town Code 244-4A.
31992 is a notice of public hearing to amend Article 19 of Chapter 330, Section 169 of the Town Code to increase the number of members on the Architectural Review Board from 5 to 7 and to increase terms from 1 year to 4 years. 31924 is a notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Fish Cove Farms, LLC, North Sea, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. 31691 authorizes acquisition of lands of Henry Hildreth, limited partnership with Randall Road, LLC, North Sea, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include those properties. 31940, secret for the Spionk North Phillips Streetscape and Pedestrian Enhancement Project application to the Suffolk County Downtown Revitalization Grant Program.
Question on the 31992, notice of public hearing on Chapter 19, Article 19 of Chapter 330, the
What page?
Architectural Review Board, page 24. Where did that come from? Why are we doing that?
That was something that I wanted to do to make our land use boards have similar numbers of people. So most of them, like, planning board, zoning board, most of the boards have 7 members. This board has 5 and sometimes has trouble with quorums.
But if they have trouble with quorums, making it larger.
Well, we're gonna add more people who will come.
Okay, but if you're having a problem with people who are already not coming, wouldn't you just, I don't know.
Well, right now they have 5, but they need to get 3 in the room to have a meeting, right? So if they have 7, they'll need to have 4 people there. But if the additional 2 people come to every meeting, then it shouldn't be a problem.
I like the term of office aspect of this resolution, from 1 to 4 years, to provide continuity for the board.
Yeah, so it's good.
Did you talk to the
We'll
board? Did they
provide
request it?
Consistency. No, I requested it.
Are you going to talk to the board?
Yeah, I can speak with the board.
Do that.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Not a question, just a request. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor for ID number 31983. This is the request to support Assembly Bill 7996 and Senate Bill. This is the land
What page is that?
swap. Alienation, thank you. Page 20.
Okay.
Okay?
You got that, Madam Clerk?
I certainly do. Thank you.
All right, so agenda's good to go, everybody? All right, Sandy, you can go ahead and publish that. All right, let's just do some updates and then executive session. So just a couple things. So one is, like, our beaches are off to a good start. Our permit sales are very high. People are loving the new Ponquag Beach Pavilion, which was, I guess, full on Memorial Day weekend. We had to use the overflow parking lot. They've been very busy at the Parks Department with all the summer recreational programs. We did have a department head meeting last week. Everybody's gearing up for the summer season, as well as lots of changes here at Town Hall, installing the new HVAC system. And obviously, we're setting up staging areas, using the auditorium we might be using it for some meetings as well as for some staging. And meetings normally held here on the second floor will be affected and possibly moved to the auditorium during that time as needed. We have submitted our application for the $10 million DRI grant for the Riverside area. This is our 4th attempt. We're competing with 17 other downtowns. And June 11th is the first of 2 informational meetings to be conducted by the Hampton Bays Water District Management, 7 p.m. at the Hampton Bays Community Center. And that's all that I have at the moment for updates. Anybody have any updates? Debbie, John?
Not at this time.
John?
Nope.
Christine?
No.
Julie? Yes?
Julie?
Sure. So if anybody knows any 14 to 17-year-olds out there, the Youth Bureau has a program called Broader Horizons. It's a paid internship program. You can get a job interning with town departments, community agencies, or businesses. Please get in an application by Monday, June 17th, and if you have more information, if you need more information, please call 631-702-2421. That's our Youth Bureau, and they will give you more info. So anybody looking for a job after school, it's a great opportunity. Also, 17th Annual Battle of the Bands coming up is it this Friday, June 14th? No, the
Next
following
Friday.
Friday, yeah.
What day is it, June 14th?
June 14th, yeah,
Next Friday.
Friday, June
What
14th.
time?
Ponquag Beach, gates open at 7, show starts at 8, $5 admission. Come on down. That's all I got.
Well, hopefully I'll get there. All right, nobody else have anything? Okay. So, for executive session, acquisitions, and confidential legal advice. All right, so I'll make a motion to close our regular work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
Second by Councilman Scalera, all in favor?
Aye.